Hello.
Okay, so good afternoon, welcome, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the 7th, I think, Rose's talk, could be the 8th, I've lost count. But delighted to have everybody here. If you're able to mute your microphones for the moment, that will be really helpful in terms of feedback and noise. If you can switch your microphones to mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. We're delighted this week to have Jorge Tovar joining us, and he's going to talk about emotions during the 2018 World Cup in Russia. It promises to be an absolutely fantastic, fascinating talk. It's joint with Juan de Dios, Tena from Liverpool University, who is joining us as well. As with all previous talks, please keep your microphones muted. Please ask questions in the chat room. I will chair. If Juan de Dios is able to answer some of the questions you might have in terms of clarification for Jorge, then he will do so. If not, we will park those questions for the Q&A session at the end. Jorge will talk for 45 minutes to an hour, and then there will be a time for Q&A at the end. I've just noticed, having logged in today, that there is now a raise your hand option in Microsoft Teams. I don't know how that works yet, so for now, let's confine our comments to the chat room, if you can. And Jorge, please do take it away from here with your talk.
Okay, hello, thank you very much. Let me share my presentation first. I think I'm based right now. I arrived in Colombia, and I think we have issues here with the connection, so I'm probably going to shut off so you can see the presentation, if that works. Hopefully you will hear me now. Okay.
Can you share yours?
So this is a work in progress. Do you see the presentation?
No, we can't see it yet. Are you able to press the middle button, the share button? That should. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, great. So hopefully are we good to go? So this is hello. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Great. So this is work in progress with Juan de Dios Tena. He's as all of you know, he's from the University of Liverpool. And I am from the Universidad Los Andes here in Bogota. I was this semester visiting the Economics Department and the Latin American Center for International Studies in the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which was very nice, at least for 2.5 months. Then I have to lock myself into a house, so I had to rush back home anyway. So what I'm going to talk today is about can we relate emotions and performance? And I'm going to dedicate the first part of the talk to what we understand for emotions and to think about what we perform. So I'm going to start with this quote, which all of you, or most of you know, everyone should know who Bill Shankly was. But it's going to motivate a bit on what we want to think of performance, what performance is. So what we're seeing here is that he, and this is a quote from the 1960s, he was always thinking about what the basic football is. So above all, the main aim is that everyone can control a ball and do the basic thing in football. It's control and pass all the time. So the main idea, what we're going to think about here, is about emotions. And there are few activities in the world that generate more emotions than not only to athletes themselves. Of course, medias, we are very excited that we're finally going to be able to see top soccer tomorrow in Germany. And we're just excited about that. We think about football, that I claim that it's probably the most globalized sport in the world and in history. and it certainly can have major impact in how people feel. And we want to understand a bit that in a more micro way, because we all agree, I hope, that goals are very special in football. They are rare, and emotions in football are triggered by goals for the most part. So we find that when our team scores a goal, we have excitement, we have celebration, and on the contrary, when our team concedes a goal, we have some kind of negative emotion. We have sadness, we have grief, we are unhappy. And so the question of players, thinking of players performing the most standard ability footballers have, and I'm going to try the idea of passion. So first, we're going to think about, or we're going to try to understand what emotions is. And I am an economist, but we have to check and review the psychological literature, which is very vast, very ample on this topic. And if I find the conclusion is that there's no unique definition for emotions, but we can say that it's just a reaction, or we can understand emotion as a reaction to some kind of a stimulus event, which in football, of course, is going to be. And the emotions are a key part in the sports psychology in more than two ways, but mainly they do these interventions, try to influence how athletes deal with emotions, get prepared for the cup, recover mentally from a defeat, for instance. And also they study how and why emotions impact performance. We're going to try to tackle a bit this second part of the literature. In economics, we are all aware nowadays it's kind of a mainstream behavioral economics, but for many years, at least since the development of the classical economics 100 years or so ago, emotions, or the impact of emotions in consumers' behavior and in general in behavior, was undermined. This changed not as recently as many think. It goes back to at least to the 1980s. And for many years, this type of exercises trying to link economics and psychology was done using some type of laboratory experiments. Now, it is true that today there is plenty of applied research linking psychology and economics. Still, there is a lot of experiments done, but there is also a lot of exercises using some type of industry or real-world data, where they try to link mood swings and behavior. And an example of this in this nice paper de la Vigna, I think it's in Economica, he reviews some cases, and I take that because he reviews quite a few papers on that topic, where a one-time mood swinger impacts discrete choice decision. So for now here, I kind of emphasize the fact that most of the literature is thinking about one-time mood changes. This is, there is nice papers that good weather will make you give a higher tip at a restaurant, so you will kind of feel happier. And in sports, of course, there is a lot of research also done. Famous paper, at least this was the first paper I read on these kind of issues years ago, is these papers with paper by Edmonds and others, where they relate international football matches to stock returns. What we do is go a bit beyond. We want to take on this literature, but we want to go a bit further using even more detailed data. So we used event level data to study how repeated, as opposed to one time, and variable stimuli impacts individuals' performance during a standard period of time. So what we will do is we are going to use data from the Russia 2018 World Cup to quantify emotions and link that to individual performance as measured by their passing ability. We want to argue a bit why we use football in this case. And I think football is important even as opposed to other sports because they're rare event. Because they are rare, you really get excited when you score a goal. Yesterday we were talking with James about that game between England and Colombia in the last World Cup when Colombia drew in the last minute, 90 minutes, and here in Colombia we were all jumping. In England they were saying, in penalties, shootouts, we always lose. So for them, that particular moment was a negative emotion. For us, it was a positive emotion, and that was the draw. It's a rare event, and we claim that these emotions stay or remain for a number of minutes before they fade out. So you score a goal, you are happy for a moment, and then your feelings get replaced by other emotions, maybe because you received a goal or you scored another goal. So the whole concept here is that goals scored, conceded, generate positive or negative emotions, which can impact the probability of successfully passing the ball. Now, when we went on to read on this literature on sports psychology, psychology and performance, psychology and economics, an important in the literature is that emotions can be culturally specific and may be interpreted differently across time and region. That means that if I go to England, if I want to say hello or I want to behave in some way, maybe it's not the standard way of how you behave. So you might feel shock, or that I go to Spain, it's a better example, and I don't kiss the woman in the cheeks as they do normally there. If I do it here in Colombia, people will feel a kind of different emotion, right? Using football takes that everything. So in a sense, I use italic because it's kind of clean, but we all understand football in the same way, at least in the basics. A goal is good, a goal against is bad. So, and moreover, in the top tournament in the world, the World Cup, it is a short, just 1 month long. Well, we have the common belief that goals in favor relate to some kind of joy or happiness, while a goal against relates to sadness or worrisome. Now, if there is any sports psychologist in the audience, I am being kind of loose. I am being very economist in this sense, because I am aware that sports psychologists have a major discussion on whether joy and happiness is the same thing, whether sadness or worrisome is the same thing. What I want to focus is on the idea that we are using a discrete change in a discrete event. So thinking about whether it goes one way or the other, most of the literature that we are aware of, at least, have evaluated the impact of different emotional states of behavior, but for the most part, they induce each participant with one particular state of preference. So, for instance, this nice paper by Conte and others, they relate these mood changes to risk preferences, and they have this idea. They have, if I remember, four particular states, but they only induce one state per participant, one emotional state per participant. We try to go using this football data a bit further and use how, for a period of time, which is a game, how continuous negative and positive stimulus impacts on individual's performance while doing a relatively simple task. So now here I want to convince you that it is important to think about passing the ball. Passing the ball is the basics, as I saw in the quote I began with. Is the basics in football. That's what kids start with when you start playing football in the park. And when you are a professional footballer, you don't think it's a natural behavior, and that is important because if emotions have an impact on this simple task, then we are empirically able to clean all other factors that may affect the probability of successfully passing the ball. Then we are finding, or we claim that we are finding, that indeed emotions may have an impact on how an individual can perform in the simplest task of his profession. So instead of that, sorry, positive emotions can impact positively performance. Indeed, one might think that if we score a goal, then we would feel happy and we would or joyful or more confident, and we will start passing the ball better. But there is evidence that it may be actually the opposite. And when you go to this kind of literature, in this particular paper, they talk about most of the literature talks about diffuse affective states, more essentially things like well-being. You really don't know what that is. In contrast to discrete forms, which is what we want to focus on, which is the fact that it's joy and gratitude. It's not as it's a step, if you want to think about that. And there has very little research, as far as we know, on multiple states, which is what we're doing here with the positive and negative emotion thing. Similarly, negative emotion can affect performance negatively, but you can think in examples, and in football, it can be very clear that you receive a goal against, and then you have to attack, and you start, because you get more adrenaline or whatever, and you start probably to perform a bit better. So it can go either way. Overall, the impact of positive or negative emotions on how footballers actually pass the ball is, for the most part, an empirical question. Now, there is a large literature on emotions and many things. There is a nice literature of emotions in sports. Here is just a sample. So I already mentioned Edmund's papers, David Carr's and Dahl papers using the effect of unexpected losses on the NFL on domestic violence. Another paper, Appeal et al., where they study the impact of basketball players' post-game reported emotions. And this is interesting because many of these papers that try to link emotions to performance actually use reported emotion by the athlete. We try to, we don't use that, and we want to think that it's an addition to the literature, not asking someone how you feel. Maybe we all played football in some category, and you can say things that you really don't mean when a game ends, or even before a game. This other paper by Hoffensitz and Mantilla, they looked at the football card, the Panini cards, the photography on these Panini cards, and decided whether the player was happy and angry. They use this nice software and stuff, and they correlate, and they find that a happy and angry expression actually can correlate with team performance. Happy, actually, I think I wrote it wrong there, but happy expressions tend to correlate with their performance in the football World Cup. And then as I said, the literature is really long. There is other literature, for example, on choking under pressure. There's a nice paper, a recent paper like this a month ago, 2 months ago, in PLOS ONE, talking about professional dart throwers, I guess you say it. and thinking about whether emotions and this type. But I want to think that this idea of choking under pressure is a bit different than what we are doing here, just with thinking about how emotions in a particular moment can affect your performance in the subsequent minutes. So, as I said, let me describe you a bit. We're going to use event level data from Russia 2018. If you use this type of data, it is Opta's data set, which how they work, at least the one I have, is they essentially follow the ball and they track the ball all the game. And so I have every event where the ball is involved. There is also this larger and better, I guess, data sets, more tracking devices where you actually follow all the 22 players all the time. I don't have that data set. Here we have just the one that follows the ball. So we have data on the coordinates on the football pitch, on the football field, where the precise location of every event that involved the balls, including, of course, shots, passes, fouls, and everything that happened during the game. And we also know who did the particular pass, so we know which players were involved. So in Russia 2018, there were 60,643 passes, which accounts for just over 1,000 passes per game. And if you remember the data from the World Cup, remember this game of Spain, I guess it was against Portugal or Morocco, where only Spain did 1,000 passes that game. Not very fruitful, they didn't win, I think, that game. But on average, there were 1,000 passes per game, of which 81.2% were successful. We have to clean a bit this data set because we don't want to take into account passes that don't make sense for our exercise. So kickoffs, corner kicks, free kicks, fair play passes, those that we see now that you send the ball off because some player is injured, hand passes by the goalkeeper. In doing that, we have 58,296 passes, of which 81.5% are successful. So before the difficulty of achieving a successful pass depends strongly on the position of the pitch. If you read this book on the number of games or many other literature, and just by being fans and experienced fans, I guess we are all regarding football, we know that two central backs passing each other the ball, or the goalkeeper passing the ball to the right defender or the left defender. Well, okay, I don't know if that really matters for our exercise, and we want to claim that it doesn't. We want to consider only passes where it matters. So we consider zones of the pitch where the difficulty to pass the ball is not trivial. And it's this like almost last third of the field. And we take that last third of the field because when we review the data set, except 3 or 4 shots, most shots during the World Cup took place in this area. So we want to think that it is in that area where really you can have some impact of being emotional at that particular moment. Doing this, the sample has now 15,301 passes, and as you can see, the accuracy is lower than before. Now we go down to 74.5% of successful passes. Now, we have defined emotions before, but I want to now define the emotions in how we are going to use it for our empirical exercise. So emotions are determined by recent goals. So goals scored or conceded by a given player's own team determine whether he is under a positive or negative spell. So if you score, if my team scores a goal, I'm going to be positively. I will have a positive emotion, and I can have a positive emotion for 3 minutes. I can have a positive emotion for 4 minutes, and I can have a positive emotion for 6 minutes. Now, how long, how much time will I be under the spell of a positive emotion is an empirical matter. I cannot know it a priori. Similarly, on the other side, if I have a goal against, I may be sad for 3 minutes, maybe for 4, or maybe for 10. It is an empirical matter. Now, the emotion may end because it was a long time since someone scored a goal in the match, but it may also end because the other team or my team against scores a goal. So if I score a goal and the other team scores a goal 3 minutes later, then my positive emotion for the 3 minutes is quickly changed to a negative emotion because they scored a goal. Similarly, if we score a goal in the last minute of the first half, yeah, we're going to be happy, but when we start the second half, we're not going to be as happy because it's not really 1 minute of the game. It's been like 60 minutes at least. So we take all that time into account to end the emotion in how we are defining it. So let me explain how we are thinking this data set using this table. First, let me define a status quo here. So I've devoted quite some time to try to explain what positive emotion is, what negative emotion is. Now we need a status quo. What is status quo? Is the time during which players have no positive or negative emotions stemming from goals scored or conceded. If you have a 0-0 game, or your game is 0-0 for a long time, well, you have no emotions stemming from goals. If you scored in the first minute of the game, well, 20 minutes later, there's nothing going on in terms of emotions regarding goals. So now that we understand the status quo, let me explain what we do here. So 3 minutes after a goal is scored, there are some passes, and under positive emotions, for instance, we only have during the World Cup 3 minutes after a goal scored, 70 passes in that particular area of the field that I defined, and the accuracy or the accuracy of passing at that point is 72%, 73%, I guess, a bit lower than during the status quo. And under negative emotions, your successful passes falls to 69%, 3 minutes. And as you can see here, we have 15,000 observations under status quo, because here I am considering that the emotions last only 3 minutes. But I said this is an empirical matter. I don't know any way of a priori knowing how many minutes will emotion last. So I have to do it empirically. So I go to 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, for instance. So at 7 minutes, we have a bunch more observation for positive emotions and for negative emotions. And we see here that accuracy is more or less constant for always for status quo. And it goes down again relative to status quo in 7 minutes here to 71% in both cases. And then we can go to 10 minutes. And again, we start to see a pattern here that when you have negative emotions, your success rate in passing the ball is lower than under status quo and also under positive emotions. So we'll try to see, and we actually find, we'll see, I'll show you, that when we econometrically do this, we kind of find this type of results. So what is our empirical strategy? We're going to do a logit estimation using the data for 3 minutes, then for 4 minutes, then for 5 minutes, and we actually go up to 15 minutes to see if we find something, but we only present 10 minutes because there is nothing beyond 9 minutes actually. So I can say for now that emotions at the most last emotions stemming from goals at the most last 9 minutes. So this is the probability that the pass attempted by player I at the precise minute from team T in game G is successful, and is a function of the following. But important here, just to make sure, when I say minute, I'm saying minute and second, so 21 minutes and 30 seconds. So for each observation is a minute second data point. So our variable of interest is this one, E. Actually, I wouldn't know how to call it. E plus negative, which is the positive or negative emotion, which I have been trying to explain to you. It's our variable of interest. Then we want to know how the player was behaving before the event. So this is the player's I percentage of successful passes during the game prior to that particular pass attempt at minute M. UTM is the number of, so I guess these two controls come mostly from the sports psychology and from the psychology literature, where they say, you know, you have to know how you were behaving before, and are you used to that type of situation. So maybe we can all name teams that are kind of used to receiving a goal in the first 20 minutes, and then so if you are used, you really don't get nervous. Or if you are, you know, I don't know, Hungary in 1954, they were always winning 2-0 at minute 10 of each game, so they were kind of used. So we want to know before each pass, how many times were each player had each player been in that under that particular emotional state. XPI MG, I draw that from the expected goals literature. So very important, yes, we are working in the last third of the pitch. We know that it is more difficult to pass the ball near the opposition goal than near my own goalkeeper. But still, you know, I want to know if the pass was difficult or not. So what I do here, or what we do here, is we take all the passes of the World Cup, all passes, and run a model in the spirit of the expected goals literature to determine the difficulty of each pass from the first pass of the World Cup to the last pass of the World Cup. And this, we expect that if a pass is easier, then the probability of passing will be higher. Now, of course, we want to know if a team is winning the game or not. Cum essentially if it's positive, if the team is winning the game, or if it's losing the negative, it's losing the game. And X and Y M are the precise coordinates. X is the long side of the pitch, Y is the wide side of the pitch. We would expect that if you're closer to the opposition goalkeeper, well, it's more difficult to actually do a pass. Minute of the pass, it may not be the same to pass the ball in minute 1 than in minute 90, right? And I think we all agree, and we'll see if that comes to be important. And then, of course, you all know Messi on the World Cup, or I guess in England, well, let's talk. You can all think about Messi in the World Cup, but none of you, or I would say none of you know who Miguel Borja is. Well, he was a Colombian player during the World Cup, and yes, we can control for all this stuff, but there is some difference, innate difference from birth between Messi and Borja, and so we need to control with player fixed effects. We also have team own and opposition fixed effects. And we also have match day fixed effects, because it's not the same to play the first game in the group stage than the third game in the group stage, than of course the semifinal or the final. So here I have some quick statistics of the data. Of course, successful previous passes goes down a bit, because for the first pass we don't have a previous pass. Yeah, not much to say here. Expected passes are more or less 75% more or less than the same thing. I mean, I guess what you can say here is that expected passes seem to be well defined. And y is normalized to, so x goes from 0 to 100. So 99, which is the max, is someone that made a pass essentially in the line at the end of the pitch. And y is normalized 0 to 50, so that it doesn't make a difference if you're attacking through the left or the right, and that's why the mean is 31, so kind of open, a bit open to right or left. So this is the table, which when seeing it like that, you see nothing. So let me run you through it. Fix the x and the y's. So I think it's a nice finding that there is no differences in passing the ball wide, but there is some difference in passing the balls on the long side of the pitch, on the pitch x. So the closer you get to the opposition goal, the more difficult, the less probability of succeeding the pass. Expected pass, great. We find what we were expecting here. The easier the pass, the probability of passing the ball will rise. The cumulative, so if you're here, we find that if you're winning the game, actually the probability of passing the ball is going to be lower. This is net of emotions. So this is just a finding. A priori, there is no clear reason why it should go one way or the other. Number of previous spells, it turns out that it doesn't matter much when we consider that the emotion lasts for 9 or 10 minutes. But if something, we find that if you are kind of used to that particular emotion, your probability of successfully passing the ball is going to be lower. Again, net of emotions. So in a sense, we say, well, drawing for experience doesn't seem to be really that important. Again, this goes in the other direction that we were expecting. But again, what we claim here is that, well, we were saying, if you have been passing the ball properly for the whole game, then maybe your next pass is going to be a good pass. But what we find here is no, it's going to be a bad pass. And we interpret this in some kind of regression to the mean, that you had so many good passes that the probability of actually making a good pass, the next one, it will be lower. Regarding negative emotions, so you see here for for minute 3, you see minus 0.74, and the coefficient kind of starts going down a bit. And we find that regarding the sign, that if you have negative emotion, your probability of passing the ball, the simplest task, will actually go down, which we actually start to see that in the summary statistics before. And we see some kind of a downward trend. I'll draw a graph for you guys just in a second. And it goes up to 10 minutes. As you see, there's no significance in minute 10, and there is no significance beyond, so I simply don't present that. And but it's very strong until minute 9. On the contrary, positive emotions, we also see this negative effect, but it's more bumpy, more jumpy. It's not as smooth as the negative emotions. Is statistically weak in minute 3, 5, 7, and it's stronger in minute 4, 6, 8. We do find some effect that even for positive emotions, you will tend to pass, your passing accuracy rate will fall a bit. We don't do 2 minutes because we just don't have enough observations for positive and negative emotions. And beyond 10, we don't find anything. I want to draw now the odds ratios for positive coefficients and negative emotion coefficients because it's very visual. And what we see here regarding negative coefficients, this is taken from the coefficients in the previous slide, is that 4 minutes after the shock, the odds of successfully passing the ball is 44% of those under status quo. And more importantly, see the trend. It's a nice trend. So you kind of have regarding negative, you have a really strong shock at the beginning, and then you start this upward trend until you lose complete significance. Now, positive emotions, we do find this effect, but if we want to talk about trend, there is no, the trend is not as strong as in negative emotions. It's shorter for sure. And you could say something goes on between minutes 4 and 8 in this particular emotion, in this particular positive emotions. So overall negative emotions fade over time. Positive emotions also decrease the probability of successfully passing the ball, and the negative, but the impact of negative emotions is stronger and more consistent. Now we have been working recently on some extensions, which I don't want to call robustness checks because I am really open to comments on what you think we can test beyond what we're doing. I think these are simply extensions. So what we do first is, well, our main exercise controls for the current game score. Remember this variable cumulative, I guess. We might want to explore how different scores may exert a disproportional effect on the response variable. So what I mean by this is, okay, does it matter if we are winning by 1 goal, 2, 3, 4 goals, we're tying, we're losing by 1 goal, or we're losing by 5-0 at the moment of making the pass? And what we find is that there is no change. The results of the variable of interest remain unaltered. Essentially, we find the thing. But more importantly, these variables that I construct for this particular exercise are not statistically significant. So other from mention that we did it, I guess it has to be done, but it doesn't add much to our main finding. Now, another extensions we're doing are splitting the sample. We split the sample. I'm never sure if it's good to split the sample or not, and whether we should do it or not, and more important, what we are really trying to capture with this sample splitting thing. But we do the variables exercise, this following exercise. We take and consider only passes when the team is winning and only passes when the team is losing. Remember anyway that we are controlling for that in the previous exercise, but still we kind of split the sample. The other exercise is we divide the sample between the group stage and the knockout stage, thinking that maybe there's a difference. And what we find here is that particularly for positive emotions, we lose any significance, and not as much for negative emotions actually, but still for positive. But I think I'm struggling, and we are struggling, I think, in terms of whether we really want to do this, and more importantly, how do we interpret this type of results? The fact that, okay, you find that positive emotions don't matter when you're in group stage only, where you're and don't matter when you're in the knockout stage only, but they matter overall. So, you know, maybe it's just a matter of number of observations. You really want to consider the entire picture. With the other exercise we did, and we find this curious result, is with age. So if you noticed, and maybe you were wondering, we didn't include age in the presentation here in the final specification, and the reason is that age, or age square, was not statistically significant, and more importantly, because it's only a month, the tournament is only a month long, and we are controlling for player fitness effects. Well, we thought, although, the age of the player did vary per game, because it's not, you don't have the same age on the first game than on the second game, but it's so little that we decided to kind of just not include it in the main specification, which in any case doesn't change whether you include age or not. But here we said, well, okay, we shouldn't include age, but let's think if younger players get nervous or older players get nervous, or what's going on here. And we only find interesting results. So for younger players and between 23 and 25, etc., we find no significance. But for older players, 29 to 32, and here you see the panel A in the graph, for negative emotions, we find that the standard result. And kind of similar for negative emotions for players older. So you can interpret, it's your last World Cup and you have more experience, but if you're going to be kicked out in your last World Cup, you're 28, 30, 36, you get nervous, you don't want to be out, it's your last opportunity. For many players, not only the last opportunity, the first and last opportunity. And that is kind of relatively simple to interpret. But then we have these positive emotions that we don't see anything for players aged 25 and 32, but we see them for very old players. And again, maybe that, they're really old. Sorry, really old. I'm much older than that, but the older relative to other football players, 34, 35, 36. And you really feel the emotion that you score. You're going to pass to the quarterfinal or semifinal or whatever, or the knockout stage, and that's why we find the results. So this is the paper. As I told you, it's work in progress. We really have still to write our nice discussion on what our findings and relate to all this literature we've been reading about sports psychology, and economics. Essentially, for now, what we find is that different type of emotions can affect an individual's over a given time period. We use full data, and we want to think that we are really adding to a literature by using this particular data. And we find that differential in its impact depending on whether the emotion is positive or negative. And, and we find that negative emotions are stronger. So that would be it.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. Really interesting talk. So I've been following the chat as we've gone through. There's a few questions to raise with you at first. Comments as well as questions. First one is from Jamin Spear, who says, goals change emotions, but also the defensive tactics and pressure. It might make it easier, harder to pass. So it might be, I guess, perhaps tactics have changed and therefore players are much more surrounded when they're passing. I don't know if you're able to control for that at all in your analysis.
Well, I claim that they do in two things. First, there are better teams and control tactics in a different way, and that's why we have these team fix effects. And we also have the expected pass, which says a lot about how difficult is it to pass in that particular situation. So yeah, I think we're controlling for that, not explicitly, but we are not interested in explicit control, but we are controlling for it. Of course, if you think there's another way to control for tactics, it would be great, but I don't see it.
Yeah, okay. I guess there's something that think about whether it's possible to identify different styles. Does UpToDate include the location of other players on the field these days, or is it just
no? Yeah. So this data is kind of the one that is the common data nowadays, the one that just follows the balls. There is this other tracking data, which is really cool, that you have the 24 players and everything else, and you can do this nice stuff. But I mean, even if you want to buy it, or I don't know, it's very difficult to have it unless they really give it to you for some particular exercise. Yeah. I don't have that data.
I know, I mean, question that springs to mind for me, having used UpToData, is, and I can't remember if you have this in, you mentioned this, is do you distinguish between different lengths of passes, short passes and long passes, or is that not there in the data anymore?
Yeah, using this update, yeah, I have all type of information regarding the ball. So I know if a pass, I actually know the exact distance and direction of the pass. And that's why I can build a nice expected pass. It's on the appendix of the paper. I didn't really dedicate time here, but when we build the expected pass, we consider everything that is involved, whether it's a big opportunity, whether it was going one direction or the other, whether everything.
Yeah, super. Juan Fui from France asks, or basically wants to clarify. He says, if he understands you correctly, you're trying to model the number of successful passes as a process through time, a stochastic time process. Is that correct?
I would need a clarification on the question. What do you mean by that?
I think it's just basically you're basically modeling the success of a pass as a function of various explanatory variables. Which
that's what we're doing. Overall, I guess what we're trying to sell here is the idea that there is this nice literature on emotions and stuff, and we don't need how to explain that.
Okay, then Carl asks, have you thought about venue fixed effects, the quality of the playing surface, perhaps, and the size of the pitch?
But I can do it. Maybe venue fixed effects. Maybe this. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they. So, question for you guys, I guess. I don't know if during the standard. I know that the field is perfect, but it might matter, and we can try it. And yeah.
I think the pitch size is regulation nowadays, but and obviously with the UpToData, it's normalized to between 0 and 1 down both sides of the field. So I think it's possibly more of an issue if there's more variation in the sizes of pitches and the stadia, for example.
Yeah, I guess maybe the fans are closer or something. Yeah, I mean, we can do that.
And the question from Dennis Coates was, are the coefficients you presented, were they coefficients or were they marginal effects? Because you also presented odds ratios.
Yeah, so they were the marginal effects, but then I drew the odds ratio because they really, I always found them really nice to look at and to understand what you're trying to show. But they're the same, yeah, they come from the same regression.
Yeah, okay. One thing I noticed was that there's the previously successful passes. They were, I mean, the coefficient there was incredibly consistent with the third decimal place across all of your regressions. That seemed quite a remarkable result. It was 0.006, I think, for all of the different minutes.
In what variable, sorry?
Previous successful passes.
Yeah. I mean, if you think, that's why when you talk to me about including, venue fixed effects and stuff, I'm fairly, I mean, we've tried a bunch of alternatives, and most of these coefficients are really, really constant, really stable across the specifications. So I guess that's empirically what the numbers show.
Yeah. Dennis Coates then goes on to ask something that I think is possibly, I don't know whether it's different, but he asks, because we talked about the difficulty of the pass with this variable that you have, but Dennis asks, is there a difference between the riskiness of the pass? I mean, I can think, as a football fan, a long pass across the back is as risky a pass as it gets, because the attacker comes in, cuts it out, and scores a goal. I don't know if the difficulty, the riskiness is factored into
it. I would say yes, because in the expected pass model, we consider that the length of the path, the distance, the angle, whether the player was alone, whether it was a filter pass, whether it was a header pass, everything that Opta provides me, we used it, and we use this forward model where you kind of statistically determine which variables to keep in the specification, and as much as we can, we did it. Of course, you would want, I don't have whether there is a player marking you at that particular moment, because I don't see I only see what the ball is doing with me, not the defenders around me. But this is kind of standard with this data.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I misunderstood. I thought that this was something that Opta provided, the expected pass. But is that something that you model yourself based on the Opta data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I did it, and okay. Yeah, I've been playing with the data for years now, and
yeah.
they do. I don't think they have the expected pass. They have expected goals, but in other things when I've been doing, I do my expected fail. So it's not that complicated.
Yeah,
you can. There's a discussion out, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. Then Wazim asks, could you comment on why there are more observations passes under negative emotions versus positive emotions?
That's I guess. Well, so let's think about it. Yeah, because it's a good question. I like the question because I think it makes one think about football work, right? When you receive a goal against, then you try to go to the opposite, to try to draw the game or to score back. And you see this tendency, we have seen this tendency that when my team scores, they go back, right? To try to defend the advantage or the draw, whatever. And that's what we're seeing here. It's just what we've seen as fans for many years. It's the data confirms it. When you score a goal, you go back a bit, and when you receive a goal, you want to press.
Yeah, that sounds like a bit of an empirical question as well, I guess, in terms of the patterns in response to a goal. Wazim also says the pass rate reduces after a goal for 3 to 5 minutes. Does the scoring rate also decrease? Do you know?
No. I wouldn't. The scoring rate in the next. Yeah, I didn't do that calculation. I don't know if. I haven't seen the data there. That's for an hour. I mean, that's an interesting question, but maybe for an hour exercise. But it's a good question. Yeah. How do scoring rates change? I think I saw some paper on basketball, maybe, or something on hockey or something related to that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what you're doing seems to fit in with this hot hand literature that you may be familiar with, in terms of whether players and teams do perform better when they've done something good. There's many others in the audience that have probably done much more on that than I have necessarily, but that seems like quite an interesting overlap with what you're doing. Jamin makes the point also on team possession and passes after a goal is that the team that's conceded the goal takes kickoff, and so they'll make more passes by those taking kickoff.
I didn't hear you well. Sorry.
So I was saying that that Jamin then commented that the team that concedes a goal will take kickoff, and so by default they make a few more passes in the following minute than the team that scored the goal. Wazim then responds.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First, we did take out we took out the kickoff pass.
Okay.
That didn't make sense, and I guess that's why we don't see in the first and second minutes after the goal many observations in the third part of the pitch. And so in a sense, when we start at minute 3, I guess that would be another justification why we start at minute 3, because we kind of let the game move on again.
Coach responds back to the question about the riskiness of passes, because he says that his concern is a behavioural one, which could be of interest independently, potentially of this, which is that after your team scores, after my team scores, confidence induces me to be more aggressive in the passes that I try.
Yeah. So regarding of how you behave and how aggressive, after reading all these papers on psychology, sports psychology stuff, we try to do the discussion on what's out there but we don't want, because when we say emotions, we just want to think about that as a script. You're more aggressive, or maybe, for me, when I score a goal, I may become more aggressive. When I score a goal, I may become less aggressive. So it's not clear how to define this particular emotion you would feel. I know there is an emotion. See? I know if football goal is good. Then if we go on that road, I would need a psychologist to work with me, because and probably we would just never end this story. But it is a valid, and I think we have been trying to make the discussion just to make sure that we know about we know the topic is there, but working on economics, not going that road where are you aggressive, are you less aggressive? We can't see it, and they try to do that with using these surveys prior to the games and after the games, and they ask athletes, when you were jumping or when you were in that particular minute, did you feel? And they do this psychological question to find out if they were aggressive. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to go a parallel road, I guess.
Yeah. Wazir makes a final suggestion, which is that you could exclude that first minute after a goal. And you mentioned you exclude the first pass, but you might exclude that first minute and look at, say, minutes 1 to 3 or minutes 1 to 5 after the goal has occurred. That's a suggestion that he makes.
So I did think, but that may last for 10. Can you repeat the question? I don't see it, and I didn't hear you well.
Yeah, the comment that Wazir made as a follow-up was just that you might exclude the first minute after a goal occurs. So you're excluding that first pass, the kickoff pass, but you might, to let the game settle down, exclude that first minute and then look at minutes 1 to 3 or minutes 1 to 5 for your analysis.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason we don't use minutes 1 after the goal is because, remember, we are considering only passes in the last third of the pitch. So there are very few observations over the entire World Cup with passes in the last third. So there's just not a statistical power. And the same thing happened actually for the second minute. We only find that there is a statistical power for the third minute onwards.
Yeah. Okay. Another suggestion from Matthew is the way in which part of your analysis, you split your sample up. One way you might split it up, I guess, is you might split it into stronger teams against weaker teams and weaker teams against stronger teams, because you can imagine that if a stronger team scores against the weaker team, they'll push on and get more goals, whereas if the weaker team scores against the stronger team, then the stronger team responds, and so the patterns you observe might be quite different if you split the sample that way as well.
You would have to use some kind of we do control for team fixed effects, own and opponent, and in splitting the sample we could actually divide it, maybe the FIFA ranking or something like that, or the difference between the ranking of the teams, and we can do that exercise and I think see what it finds. I want to answer Wasim Reham. He's right. He said, so if passer in final third, the kickoff. The problem is that since we did it sequentially in the paper, I keep saying that I didn't consider the kickoff, but it's true. It's irrelevant in this particular exercise at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got to the end of the. We've got one more question just thrown in there. It could be somehow different for penalty goals within the state. I guess the type of goal might have an effect, perhaps, is what the question is suggesting. just goal, VAR, or something perhaps?
Yeah, I don't know. We did think about that at the very beginning.
Mm.
But at the end, we say a goal is a goal. And, when I was a kid, and soccer players didn't celebrate penalty kicks. It wasn't, I mean, even when you were in school, you didn't celebrate that, but it wasn't proper. I don't know. Now you see players run around, and they do it, of course, in the World Cup. So I feel it's just a goal is a goal nowadays, and it doesn't matter if it's with the hand. You saw Maradona in '86, right? And you felt it. So a goal is a goal for this paper.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. That's basically all the questions in the chat. And so what we can do now with the last question we have is, if anyone has a question, if they want to unmute their microphone and ask that question, please do feel free to do so. What we find sometimes is some of the members can't use the chat function for whatever reason, still ironing out those details. And so if people want to ask questions, they're more than welcome to.
I need to open this. Yeah.
So my son wanted to interrupt there. Any questions at all for Jorge?
I guess we're good.
Right, you've answered all the questions that are there to be asked, which is fantastic. So thank you very, very much, Jorge. That was a really, really interesting talk. Obviously, it was emotions on the field rather than emotions off the field. But these things all matter. These things all they're all a part of sport, but also a part of life more generally. We do things differently based on the way we feel across the whole sweep of things. So it was a really interesting talk. Just as we wrap up, I want to flag up that next week. I'm going to try and share my screen. Here we go. Next week we have James Reade from the University of Memphis, who's going to talk on the consequences of relegation and promotion in European soccer leagues, a regression discontinuity approach. And also, whilst I'm sharing information, I also want to remind you that we have a call for papers open. So if you do want to present in the Roses talks in the months of July, August, and the start of September, please do check out the information. You can find it via my Twitter feed, and it's also possible you can find it via our research website at the University of Reading. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for being part of today's 7th Roses seminar. I hope you all stay safe. Look forward to seeing you all again this time next week for the 8th Roses talk with James Reade. So have a good weekend and goodbye, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. Take care.